The winter wind carried the scent of betrayal through the courtyard where Freya Sunhunter stood, her wrists bound with iron chains that burned against her pale skin. The alpha of her pack, Marcus Thornwood, held the auction gavel as if it were a weapon, his eyes devoid of mercy as he surveyed the crowd of bidders who had gathered like vultures. Freya's blonde hair whipped across her face, but she refused to lower her gaze. She had been rejected, deemed worthless by her own people, and now she was being sold like livestock to pay the debts her pack had accumulated through years of poor leadership and reckless wars. The irony tasted bitter on her tongue. She had given everything to the Sunhunter pack, only to be discarded when they needed currency more than loyalty. The bidding started low, insultingly so, and Freya felt each number called out like a blade against her spirit. Merchants shouted their offers, their eyes calculating her worth in coin rather than character. A few alphas from neighboring territories leaned forward with interest, their intentions written clearly in their predatory smiles. Freya's wolf stirred within her, restless and angry, but there was nothing either of them could do. An Omega without a pack was nothing in this world. An Omega being sold was less than nothing. Then the atmosphere shifted. A presence entered the square that made even the boldest alpha straighten their spine and lower their gaze. Freya felt it before she saw him, a power so ancient and commanding that it seemed to bend the very air around him. Gabriel Ironmoon, the Alpha King, emerged from the shadows at the edge of the courtyard, his massive frame cutting through the crowd like a dark mountain moving through fog. His long black hair fell past his shoulders, wild and untamed, and his beard framed a face carved from stone and war. He wore his authority like a second skin, every step deliberate, every glance a command. Whispers erupted through the crowd. The Alpha King never attended common auctions. His presence here was unprecedented, inexplicable. Marcus Thornwood nearly dropped his gavel, his face paling as he bowed deeply. Gabriel ignored him entirely. His eyes, dark as midnight and just as unfathomable, found Freya across the distance, and something passed between them that neither could name. Recognition. Destiny. A pull that transcended reason. Gabriel raised his hand, and silence fell like a guillotine. When he spoke, his voice was a low rumble that resonated in Freya's chest. One word, one number, an amount so staggering that gasps echoed through the square. It was not a bid. It was a declaration. He was not offering coin. He was offering his crown, his kingdom, everything he possessed. The message was clear to all who heard it. This Omega was beyond price, and anyone who dared challenge his claim would face the wrath of the most powerful alpha in all the territories. Marcus accepted immediately, trembling as he brought down the gavel. Sold. Freya's life, her future, her very existence now belonged to Gabriel Ironmoon. As guards moved to transfer her chains to the Alpha King's men, Freya finally met his gaze fully. What she saw there stole her breath. Not cruelty, not possession, but something far more dangerous. Hunger, need, and beneath it all, a tenderness so profound it terrified her more than any threat could have. Gabriel approached her slowly, as if she were a wounded creature that might flee. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's bow. When he reached her, he towered over her small frame, yet he knelt before her, bringing his eyes level with hers. The Alpha King knelt for no one, and yet here he was, on one knee in the mud and snow, as if she were the royalty and he the supplicant. He reached out with hands that had ended wars and crushed rebellions, and with a gentleness that defied his reputation, he broke her chains. The iron fell away, clattering to the ground, and Freya felt the burn marks on her wrists begin to heal in the presence of his overwhelming power. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. You are free, he said, his voice meant only for her. You have always been free. I did not buy you, Freya Sunhunter. I claimed you. There is a difference. One you will come to understand. Before she could respond, before she could process the impossibility of this moment, Gabriel stood and removed his heavy fur cloak, draping it around her shoulders. It smelled of pine and winter storms, and something uniquely him, something that made her wolf purr with contentment for the first time in years. He offered her his arm, not as a master to a slave, but as an equal to an equal. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the Alpha King escorted the rejected Omega away from the auction square, away from the pack that had betrayed her, and toward a destiny neither of them fully understood yet. The journey to the Iron Moon territory took 3 days through treacherous mountain passes and ancient forests where wolves had run since the beginning of time. Gabriel provided Freya with her own carriage, her own guards, and never once tried to enter her space without permission. At night, they made camp under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, and Gabriel would sit by the fire, watching over her tent with a vigilance that never wavered. His men whispered among themselves, confused by their king's behavior. Gabriel Ironmoon was known for his ruthlessness in battle, his iron control, his ability to make impossible decisions without hesitation. Yet here he was, transformed into something softer, in the presence of this small blonde Omega, who barely spoke and trusted no one. On the second night, Freya finally emerged from her tent to sit by the fire. Gabriel stiffened, alert to her presence, but he did not crowd her. He simply poured her tea from the pot, warming by the flames, and offered it to her with both hands, a gesture of respect among their kind. She accepted it, their fingers brushing, and the contact sent sparks racing up her arm. The mate bond, she realized with shock. It hummed between them, golden and inevitable, though neither had spoken it aloud yet. "Why?" she asked, her voice rough from disuse. Why would the Alpha King bid his crown for a rejected Omega? Everyone knows I am worthless. My own pack made that clear. Gabriel's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. But when he looked at her, his expression softened. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, and spoke with a sincerity that unraveled something tight in her chest. "Because from the moment I saw you standing in those chains, refusing to bow, refusing to break, I knew you were the strongest person in that entire courtyard. Because your pack were fools who could not recognize treasure when it stood among them. Because my wolf knew yours, called to yours, and I have learned to trust my instincts above all else. And because, Freya Sunhunter, you deserve someone who will fight for you the way you have fought for others your entire life." His words were arrows that found their mark in her carefully constructed walls. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I have nothing to offer you. No power, no connections, no wealth. You could have any Omega, any Alpha, anyone you desired. Why me?" Gabriel smiled then, a rare and beautiful thing that transformed his harsh features into something almost gentle. "You have everything to offer me. Your strength, your spirit, your truth. As for why you, I cannot explain it any more than I can explain why the moon rises or the seasons change. Some things simply are. You are my mate, Freya. I knew it the moment our eyes met. And I would bid not just my crown, but my very life for the chance to prove to you that you are worthy of love, of devotion, of a future where you are cherished rather than discarded." Freya's tears fell then, hot against her cold cheeks, and Gabriel reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she did not, he cupped her face in his large hands and brushed away her tears with his thumbs. The gesture was so tender, so at odds with the fierce warrior king the world knew, that Freya felt something crack open inside her heart, letting in a sliver of hope she had thought long dead. That night, she did not return to her tent immediately. Instead, she sat by the fire with Gabriel, and for the first time in years, she spoke. She told him about her childhood, about being an Omega in a pack that valued strength above all else. She told him about the Alpha who was supposed to be her mate, who had rejected her publicly, claiming she was too weak to bear his heirs. She told him about the years of abuse, the slow accumulation of debts that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with corrupt leadership, and finally, the day she learned she would be sold to the highest bidder. Gabriel listened to every word, his jaw clenching tighter with each revelation, his eyes burning with a fury that promised retribution for those who had hurt her. But when he touched her, it was only with gentleness, only with care. As she spoke, Gabriel moved closer, slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished. But Freya found herself leaning toward him rather than away, drawn by the warmth radiating from his massive frame, by the safety she felt in his presence. When her voice broke on particularly painful memories, Gabriel's hand found hers, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a gesture meant to soothe. The simple touch sent tingles up her arm, and Freya marveled at how such a small contact could feel so significant, so right. In turn, Gabriel shared pieces of himself he had shown no other. He told her about the weight of the crown, the loneliness of leadership, the countless nights he had stared at the moon and wondered if he would ever find the one person who could see past his title to the man beneath. He told her about losing his family in the war, about becoming Alpha King at an age when he should have been learning to love rather than learning to kill. He told her about the darkness he carried, the violence he was capable of, and the fear that he would never find someone who could love all of him, shadows included. As he spoke, his voice grew rougher, more vulnerable, and Freya saw the cracks in his armor. Without thinking, she reached up and touched his face, her small hand against his bearded cheek. Gabriel froze, his eyes closing at the contact, and Freya felt the shudder that ran through his powerful body. When his eyes opened again, they glowed with emotion so intense it stole her breath. "I see you," she whispered. "Not the king. You, Gabriel. And what I see is not darkness. It is depth. It is complexity. It is a man who has carried the weight of the world and remained standing." Gabriel caught her hand, pressing it more firmly against his face, then turning to kiss her palm. The gesture was intimate, reverent, and Freya felt heat bloom in her chest, spreading through her entire body. No one had ever touched her with such tenderness. No one had ever looked at her the way Gabriel did, as if she were something precious beyond measure. On the third morning of their journey, Freya woke to find fresh wildflowers outside her tent, frost still clinging to their petals. She knew immediately they were from Gabriel, gathered before dawn in the frozen meadow they had passed the day before. When she emerged holding them, she found him by the horses, and the way his eyes softened when he saw her cradling his gift made her heart skip. "They are beautiful," she said, approaching him. Gabriel turned fully toward her, and there was something boyish in his expression, almost shy. "Not nearly as beautiful as you," he said quietly. "I saw them and thought of you. Golden like your hair, delicate but resilient, surviving in harsh conditions. I wanted you to have something that reminded you that beauty persists even in winter." Freya felt tears prick her eyes at the poetry in his words, at the thought of this fierce warrior king picking flowers for her in the pre-dawn darkness. She stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "No one has ever given me flowers before." Something fierce and possessive flashed across Gabriel's face. "Then I will give you flowers every day for the rest of our lives," he vowed. "You will never lack for beauty, for tenderness, for gestures that tell you how cherished you are." "You do not frighten me," Freya said softly, meeting his gaze. "I have seen true cruelty, and whatever darkness you carry, it is not that. You are fierce, yes, dangerous, undoubtedly, but you are also kind. I see it in the way you treat your men, in the way you have treated me. You are two sides of the same coin, Gabriel Ironmoon, and I think perhaps I need both." Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. "Then I will give you both," he promised. "I will be the shield that protects you from the world and the soft place where you can rest. I will be the storm and the shelter. Whatever you need, Freya, I will be." They reached the Iron Moon territory on the third day, and Freya was unprepared for its beauty. The castle rose from the mountainside like a crown of stone and ice, surrounded by forests so vast they seemed to stretch into eternity. The pack members who lined the roads did not look at her with contempt or pity, but with curiosity and respect. Gabriel had sent word ahead, and they knew she was coming not as a slave, but as their future queen. The weight of that realization nearly buckled her knees, but Gabriel was there, his hand at the small of her back, steadying her. As they entered the great hall, Freya was overwhelmed by its grandeur. Tapestries depicting ancient battles hung from the walls, and a massive fireplace roared at the far end, casting dancing shadows across the stone floor. Gabriel's advisors and highest-ranking pack members had assembled, and they watched with barely concealed shock as their king, who had never shown interest in anyone before, ushered this small Omega forward as if she were made of glass and moonlight. Gabriel addressed his people with the authority that had made him legend. "This is Freya Sunhunter, my mate and your future Luna Queen. Any who disrespect her disrespect me. Any who harm her sign their own death warrant. She has been through trials none of you can imagine, and she has survived with her spirit intact. You will treat her with the honor she deserves, or you will answer to me." The declaration sent ripples through the assembled crowd, but no one dared protest. Gabriel's word was law, and his protection absolute. He turned to Freya, his expression softening. "I have prepared chambers for you. You will have your own space, your own sanctuary. I will not rush you, Freya. We have time for you to heal, to trust, to choose me of your own free will rather than out of obligation or gratitude." That night, alone in chambers more luxurious than anything she had ever imagined, Freya stood at the window and looked out over the moonlit territory. She could feel Gabriel's presence somewhere in the castle, could sense him through the mate bond that grew stronger with each passing hour. He had meant what he said. He was giving her space, giving her choice, even though she knew it cost him. The pull between them was magnetic, undeniable, but he would not act on it until she was ready. Days turned into weeks, and Freya began to understand the full measure of the man who had claimed her. In public, Gabriel was every inch the Alpha King. He ruled with an iron fist, making decisions that affected thousands without hesitation. He trained with his warriors at dawn, his movements a deadly dance of power and precision. He negotiated treaties and crushed rebellions with equal efficiency. He was ruthless to his enemies, unforgiving to traitors, and absolutely terrifying when angered. Freya watched him execute a conspirator who had plotted against the crown, and she saw the cold calculation in his eyes, the complete absence of mercy. But with her, he transformed. Every evening, he would knock softly on her door and ask permission to enter. He would bring her gifts, small things he thought she might enjoy. Books, because she mentioned once she loved to read. A delicate silver wolf pendant, because he noticed her fingers always went to her bare throat, as if searching for something lost. Rare flowers from the southern territories, because he wanted to see her smile. He would sit with her by her fireplace and talk, always talk, sharing stories and laughter and comfortable silences. He never pushed, never demanded, never took. He only gave. One evening, 3 weeks into her stay, Gabriel arrived with a small wooden box. When Freya opened it, she found paints and brushes, and her breath caught. "How did you know?" she asked, looking up at him with wonder. Gabriel sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You mentioned once, briefly, that you used to paint before your pack decided such pursuits were frivolous for an Omega. I thought perhaps you might like to try again. I had these brought from the finest artisan in the southern territories." Freya's eyes filled with tears. She had not painted in over 5 years, had convinced herself that part of her was dead. And here was Gabriel, seeing a piece of her soul she thought she had hidden, and giving it back to her. Without thinking, she threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. Gabriel went rigid with surprise for a moment, then his arms came around her, gentle but secure, holding her as if she were made of starlight and dreams. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest, breathing in his scent of pine and winter storms. "Thank you for seeing me." Gabriel's arms tightened fractionally. "I will always see you, Freya," he murmured into her hair. "Every part of you, every dream you carry, every piece they tried to diminish. I see it all, and I treasure it all." From that night forward, Freya painted while Gabriel worked on his correspondence, the two of them sharing her chambers in comfortable silence. Sometimes Gabriel would pause in his writing to watch her work, his expression soft with admiration. Sometimes Freya would look up to find him staring, and instead of feeling uncomfortable, she felt seen, appreciated, desired in a way that was about more than physical attraction. He taught her to trust again. He showed her the territory, introducing her to pack members who greeted her with warmth. One afternoon, he took her to the training grounds and offered to teach her to defend herself. When Freya hesitated, remembering all the times she had been told she was too weak to fight, Gabriel knelt before her, as he had that first day. "Your worth is not measured by your ability to fight," he said, his hands gentle on her arms. "But I would sleep easier, knowing you have the skills to protect yourself, should I ever fail in my duty to protect you. Which I will not," he added fiercely. "But humor me, my Freya. Let me give you this tool, this confidence." And so Freya trained, and Gabriel was a patient teacher, praising her progress, never mocking her mistakes. He showed her how to use her smaller size as an advantage, how to be quick rather than strong, how to find vulnerable points on larger opponents. And when she finally managed to flip him during a sparring session, more by luck than skill, the pride in his eyes was worth more than any crown. "You are magnificent," he breathed, looking up at her from his position on the ground, and the heat in his gaze made Freya's cheeks flush. She offered him a hand up, and when he took it, he pulled her down instead, catching her against his chest. For a moment, they lay there in the training ring, Freya sprawled across Gabriel's broad body, their faces inches apart. The world seemed to still. Gabriel's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "I want to kiss you," he said, his voice rough with restraint. "But I will not unless you want it too. Tell me, Freya. Tell me if you want this." Freya's heart pounded so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Yes," she whispered. "I want this. I want you." Gabriel's eyes flared gold, and he closed the distance between them with a gentleness that belied his strength. The kiss started soft, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. But Freya did not pull away. She leaned in, her fingers tangling in his long black hair, and Gabriel groaned against her mouth, deepening the kiss with a passion that made her toes curl. He kissed her like she was oxygen, and he had been drowning, like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "I have dreamed of this," he confessed, "every night since I first saw you. But the reality is so much better than any dream." Freya smiled, tracing the line of his jaw. "We are in the middle of the training grounds," she pointed out. "Your warriors are watching." Gabriel glanced around at the assembled pack members, all of whom were suddenly very interested in their own training, pointedly not looking at their king and his mate. "Let them watch," he said, turning back to Freya with a grin that transformed his harsh features into something boyish and beautiful. "Let them see that their king has found his queen, and that he would embarrass himself 1,000 times over for one more kiss from her lips." He taught her to trust again. He showed her the territory, introducing her to pack members who greeted her with warmth. He took her to the high meadow where wildflowers grew even in winter, a place of magic where the veil between worlds was thin. They would walk there in the evenings, hand in hand, and Gabriel would tell her stories of the ancient wolves, of magic and legends, and Freya would listen with her head on his shoulder, feeling more at peace than she ever had. One night, under a full moon that painted everything silver, Gabriel and Freya stood in that meadow, and he turned to her with an expression of such vulnerability, it took her breath away. "Freya," he said, taking both her hands in his, "I know we have only known each other a short time by some measures, but my wolf has known yours since the moment we met. The mate bond pulls at me every second of every day. I dream of you. I wake thinking of you. I spend my days looking for excuses to be near you. And I need you to know that I am yours, completely and irrevocably, for as long as you will have me." Freya felt tears stream down her cheeks. "I am yours too," she said. "I fought it at first, too afraid to trust, too damaged to believe. But you have been so patient, so kind, so utterly devoted. You make me feel things I thought I would never feel. Safe, valued, desired, loved. I love you, Gabriel Ironmoon. I love all of you." Gabriel pulled her into his arms, and they stood there in the moonlight, two souls finally acknowledging what had been true from the beginning. They were meant for each other, fated, destined, and no force in heaven or earth could break what had been forged between them. He held her when nightmares woke her screaming, appearing at her door within seconds of her distress, gathering her into his arms and whispering promises that she was safe, that she would always be safe, that no one would ever hurt her again. Those nights, he would stay, lying beside her on top of the covers, his presence a shield against the demons of her past. He would stroke her hair and hum old wolf songs until she fell back asleep, and Freya would wake in the morning still wrapped in his arms, feeling cherished beyond measure. Freya felt herself falling, slowly, and then all at once. She fell in love with his contradictions, the way he could order an execution without flinching, and then spend an hour helping a pack child find their lost toy. She fell in love with his intelligence, the way he saw 10 steps ahead in every situation. She fell in love with his vulnerability when he was alone with her, the way he dropped his armor and let her see the lonely man beneath the crown. She fell in love with his devotion, the way he looked at her as if she were his entire world, as if nothing else mattered. The courting gifts continued. Gabriel seemed to delight in discovering things that would make her happy. A rare book of poetry from a traveling merchant. A blanket woven from the softest wool, in shades of blue that matched her eyes. A music box that played a haunting melody he said reminded him of her. Each gift came with a note in his bold handwriting, words that made her heart flutter. For my Freya, who deserves all the beauty in the world. For my mate, who makes even the darkest days bright. For the woman who has become my everything. They developed rituals, small intimacies that belonged only to them. Every morning, Gabriel would find her and press a kiss to her forehead, whispering, "Good morning, my love." Every evening they would walk the ramparts together, his arm around her waist, watching the sun set over their territory. On cold nights, they would sit by the fire in the great hall, and Freya would read aloud while Gabriel listened, his head in her lap, her fingers running through his long black hair. These moments of domestic peace meant more to both of them than any grand gesture could. One afternoon, Gabriel took her to the castle's library, a massive room filled with thousands of books. "This is yours now," he said, watching her face light up with wonder. "Everything here is yours. I have instructed the scholars to acquire any book you desire, any text you wish to study. I want you to have the education your pack denied you. I want you to have every opportunity to grow and learn and become whoever you wish to be." Freya turned to him, overwhelmed. "You give me so much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "More than I ever dreamed possible. How can I ever repay you?" Gabriel pulled her close, his hands framing her face. "You repay me by existing," he said simply. "By being here. By choosing to stay with me. By smiling when I enter a room. By letting me love you. That is worth more than all the treasures in all the kingdoms combined." Their physical intimacy grew slowly, naturally. Kisses became longer, more passionate. Touches lingered. Gabriel would pull her into his lap during their evening talks, and Freya would tuck herself against his chest, feeling safe and desired in equal measure. He worshipped her with words and touches, always careful, always attentive to her comfort. He told her she was beautiful when she woke with tangled hair. He told her she was brilliant when she offered insights in council meetings. He told her she was strong when she faced down pack members who questioned her authority. And Freya blossomed under his love. She grew confident, certain of her place by his side. She began to wear the crown he had made for her without feeling like an imposter. She spoke in council meetings with authority, her ideas valued and implemented. She trained with the warriors and held her own. She used her Omega gifts of empathy and healing to help resolve disputes, to counsel troubled pack members, to be the heart of the territory while Gabriel was its shield. One evening, 6 weeks after her arrival, Gabriel knocked on her door as usual. But when Freya opened it, she did not step back to let him in. Instead, she stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She reached up, her hand trembling only slightly, and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. Gabriel went completely still, as if any movement might shatter this fragile moment. "I choose you," she whispered. "I choose this. I choose us. You have been patient and kind and everything I never thought I would find. You make me feel safe and cherished and strong. I love you, Gabriel Ironmoon. Not because you bought me or claimed me, but because you saw me when I was invisible, valued me when I was worthless, and loved me when I was broken." Gabriel's eyes closed, and when they opened again, they were molten gold with emotion. "Freya Sunhunter," he said, his voice rough. "You were never invisible. You blazed like a star in that courtyard, and I was blinded by you. You were never worthless. You are priceless, beyond measure, beyond compare, and you were never broken. You were bent by circumstance, tested by fire, and you emerged stronger than steel. I love you not despite your past, but because of it, because it made you who you are, and who you are is everything I have ever wanted and never hoped to find." He kissed her then, and it was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and claiming and desperate. Years of loneliness and longing poured into the touch of lips and tongue. Freya met his passion with her own, her fingers tangling in his long black hair, her body pressing against his as if she could merge them into one being. Gabriel lifted her as if she weighed nothing, carrying her to the bed, and for the first time since her world had fallen apart, Freya felt whole. They came together like thunder and lightning, like fire and rain, two forces of nature colliding and creating something entirely new. Gabriel worshipped every inch of her pale skin, his hands and mouth mapping her body as if committing it to memory. He whispered her name like a prayer, told her she was perfect, told her she was his everything. He was careful even in his passion, always checking, always ensuring her comfort, always putting her pleasure before his own. Freya had never felt so cherished, so desired, so completely seen. Every touch was reverent. Every kiss was a promise. Gabriel made love to her as if she were the most precious thing in existence, and when she cried out his name, he swallowed the sound with his mouth, as if he could taste her pleasure. And when her hands explored his body, tracing the scars that marked his skin, he shuddered under her touch, vulnerable in a way he had never been with anyone else. "This is forever," he breathed against her skin. "You and me. I am yours until the stars go dark, until the mountains crumble to dust, until the end of all things. And even then, I will find you in whatever comes after, and love you there too." And when they finally joined, when the mate bond snapped fully into place, the sensation was so overwhelming that Freya cried out, golden light exploding around them as their souls recognized each other and entwined. The connection was profound, cosmic, a joining that went beyond the physical. Freya could feel Gabriel's emotions as if they were her own. His love, vast and endless as the ocean. His devotion, unshakable as mountains. His joy, bright as the sun. And threading through it all, a possessiveness that should have frightened her but instead made her feel claimed in the best possible way. "Mine," his soul seemed to cry. "Mine forever." And Freya's soul answered with equal fervor. "Yours," it sang. "Always and eternally yours." Afterwards, they lay tangled together, Gabriel's arms wrapped protectively around her, her head resting on his chest, where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. This, she thought, this was home, not the castle or the territory, but this man who held her as if she were precious, who looked at her as if she hung the moon and stars. "Mine," Gabriel murmured into her hair. "My mate, my love, my Freya." "Yours," she agreed, pressing a kiss to his chest. "Always yours." They stayed in bed for hours, talking and touching, learning every inch of each other. Gabriel traced the scars on her back from punishments she had endured, and she felt his rage through the bond, felt his desire to destroy everyone who had hurt her. But he only kissed each mark, as if he could heal them with his love. Freya explored the battle scars that covered his torso, each one a story, a moment he had survived. And he told her about each one, hiding nothing from her, letting her see all of him. As dawn approached, Gabriel pulled her closer, his hand splayed possessively across her stomach. "I have dreamed of this moment since I first saw you," he confessed. "But I was terrified too. Terrified that you would never choose me, that I would spend eternity loving you from a distance, giving you space and time and freedom, but never truly having you." Freya tilted her head back to look at him. "You have me," she assured him, "completely. The bond has sealed it, but even before that, you had my heart. You won it with your patience, your kindness, your unwavering devotion. I am yours, Gabriel, in every way that matters." The days following their mating were a blur of happiness. Gabriel could barely stand to be apart from her. He brought her to council meetings, seated beside him on a throne that matched his own, and asked her opinion on every decision. He took her riding through the forests, teaching her the boundaries of their territory, introducing her to the magic that ran through the land. They would stop in hidden clearings and make love under the open sky, the mate bond singing between them, amplifying every touch, every sensation. At night, Gabriel would worship her body with single-minded devotion, learning what made her gasp, what made her moan, what made her shatter in his arms. He was insatiable in his desire for her, but it was never just physical. Every time they came together, it was an affirmation of their bond, a celebration of the miracle that they had found each other. And Freya matched his passion, discovering her own desire, her own power over this fierce warrior who would literally die for her. One morning, Freya woke to find Gabriel already awake, propped on his elbow, watching her sleep. She smiled drowsily. "How long have you been staring at me?" she asked. Gabriel brushed a strand of blonde hair from her face. "Hours," he admitted without shame. "I cannot help it. Sometimes I fear this is all a dream, that I will wake and find you were never real. So I watch you breathe, watch the sun play across your skin, and I thank the moon goddess for bringing you to me." Freya reached up to pull him down for a kiss. "I am very real," she murmured against his lips, "and I am not going anywhere." They made love again, slow and tender in the morning light, and afterwards, Gabriel pulled her into the bath he had prepared, the water hot and scented with oils. He washed her hair with gentle hands, massaged her shoulders, and Freya leaned back against his broad chest, feeling utterly content. These moments of domestic intimacy were as precious as their passion, maybe more so. This was the life she had never dared to dream of. Peace, love, a partner who valued her as an equal. But their happiness was not without challenges. News of the Alpha King's mate spread quickly through the territories, and not everyone was pleased. The Sun Hunter pack, learning of Freya's elevation to Luna Queen, attempted to reclaim her, sending envoys with false claims that the sale had been invalid. Gabriel received them in his throne room, Freya at his side wearing a crown of silver and moonstone, and his expression was carved from ice. "You sold her," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "You chained her like an animal and auctioned her to the highest bidder. You have no claim to her, no rights, no standing. Leave my territory before I decide that your presence here is an act of war." But the envoys pressed, emboldened by desperation. Alpha Marcus believed he could negotiate, could use Freya's past against her. They brought up her rejection, her supposed weakness, insinuating that she was unfit to be Luna Queen. Every word was a blade aimed at her heart, and Freya felt old wounds trying to reopen. Gabriel stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. His eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising to the surface, and the power that rolled off him was suffocating. "You dare," he growled, his voice more animal than human, "to insult my mate in my own hall. You dare to question her worth when you were too blind to see it yourselves. You dare to spread lies about the woman who is stronger than every single one of you combined." He descended the steps of his throne like an avenging angel, and grown alphas backed away from him in fear. "Freya Sun Hunter is not the one on trial here. You are. You had a treasure and you threw it away. You had an omega of incomparable strength and spirit, and you broke her, rejected her, sold her. That is your failing, not hers. And if I ever hear that the Sun Hunter pack has so much as spoken her name again, I will come for you personally, and there will not be enough of your pack left to bury." The envoys fled, and Gabriel returned to Freya, the violence draining from him instantly, replaced by concern. His hands, which moments ago had been curled into fists ready to destroy, now cupped her face with infinite gentleness. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Did their words hurt you?" Freya smiled, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Once, they would have destroyed me, but not anymore. You taught me my worth, Gabriel. They cannot take that from me again." Still, the threats continued. Other packs, jealous of the Iron Moon territory's power, saw Freya as a weakness to exploit. An Omega Queen was unprecedented, and many believed that Gabriel's devotion to her made him vulnerable. They were wrong. Gabriel's love for Freya did not weaken him. It gave him something to protect, and there was nothing more dangerous than Gabriel Ironmoon with something to lose. The assassination attempt came 3 months into their mating. Infiltrators breached the castle during a new moon when magic was at its weakest. Freya woke to the sound of steel on steel, and before she could process what was happening, Gabriel was there, a massive sword in his hands, his bare chest splattered with the blood of those who had dared threaten his mate. He fought like a demon, his movements too fast to follow, cutting down enemies with brutal efficiency. When the last assassin fell, Gabriel turned to Freya, and the contrast nearly broke her heart. Murder in his eyes transforming to love in the space of a heartbeat. He gathered her close, checking her for injuries with shaking hands despite the carnage around them. "You are unhurt," he said, and it was not a question, but a desperate confirmation. "Tell me you are unhurt, Freya." "I am fine," she assured him, her hands on his face, forcing him to look at her. "I am safe because of you. I am alive because you protect me. Breathe, my love. I am here. I am whole." Gabriel collapsed to his knees, pulling her down with him, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "If I had lost you," he whispered. "If they had succeeded. There is no corner of the world I would not burn. No enemy I would not destroy. No line I would not cross. You are my everything, Freya. Without you, I am nothing but the monster they all think I am." "Then it is good that you will never be without me," she said firmly. "We are mated, Gabriel. We are bound by soul and by choice. Nothing will separate us. Nothing." That night, after the bodies had been removed and the castle secured, Gabriel carried Freya to their chambers and refused to let her go. He held her in the bath while he washed the fear and blood away. He dried her with gentle hands and dressed her in the softest nightgown. And then he laid her in their bed and curled around her, his larger body a shield, his arms a fortress. "I need you," he confessed into the darkness. "I need you to understand how essential you are to my existence. Before you, I was a king. Powerful, yes. Respected, feared. But I was alone. I was cold inside, carved from ice and duty. And then you came, and you melted me. You made me feel again. You gave me hope and joy and purpose beyond the crown. You are not just my mate, Freya. You are the reason my heart beats, the reason I wake each morning. You are everything." Freya turned in his arms, pressing her forehead to his. "And you are my salvation," she whispered. "You took a broken girl in chains and showed her she was a queen. You loved me when I could not love myself. You fought for me when no one else would. You gave me a life worth living, Gabriel. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. The depth of it, the completeness of it." Gabriel kissed her then, soft and sweet and infinitely tender. "We will protect each other," he promised. "We will face whatever comes together, and we will survive because we are stronger together than we ever were apart." They made love that night with a desperation born of nearly losing each other, each touch a reaffirmation that they were alive, they were together, they were safe. And afterwards, as Freya fell asleep in Gabriel's arms, she felt the bond pulse between them, stronger than ever, an unbreakable thread that tied their souls together across any distance, through any danger. The attempt on her life galvanized Gabriel in ways Freya had not anticipated. He became even more protective, assigning her a personal guard of his most trusted warriors. He taught her to fight, refusing to let her remain helpless, and Freya discovered she had a natural talent for it. Her Omega strength, so long dismissed as weakness, was actually different, more focused. Where Alphas had brute force, Omegas had precision and speed. Under Gabriel's tutelage, she became formidable in her own right. But more than physical protection, Gabriel gave her power. He brought her into his councils, asked her opinion on matters of state, valued her insight. The advisors who had initially been skeptical of their Omega Queen learned quickly that she was brilliant, that her perspective often saw solutions they had missed. Freya flourished in this new role, no longer the rejected Omega, but a queen in truth as well as title. A year passed, then two, and the Iron Moon territory prospered under their joint rule. Gabriel's strength and Freya's wisdom complemented each other perfectly. They became the stuff of legend, the Alpha King who had bid his crown for an Omega, and the Omega Queen who had proven herself worthy of it 10 times over. Their love story spread through the territories, a tale told to young wolves about true mates and destiny. But the past has a way of returning. News reached them that Marcus Thornwood, the Alpha who had sold Freya, had been overthrown by his own pack. The Sun Hunter pack was in chaos, leaderless and vulnerable. Other territories were preparing to invade, to split the land among themselves. Gabriel brought the intelligence to Freya, leaving the decision in her hands. "What would you have me do?" he asked. "They are your former pack. The choice is yours." Freya looked at the reports, her heart a complicated tangle of emotions. Part of her wanted to let them suffer as she had suffered. Part of her wanted revenge for the years of pain. But a larger part, the part that Gabriel had helped heal, wanted something different. "Help them," she said finally. "Send aid. Offer them a place within the Iron Moon territory as a subsidiary pack. They were cruel to me, yes, but there are innocents there who do not deserve to suffer for the sins of their leaders." Gabriel smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "You are far more merciful than I would be. But your word is law, my queen. It will be done." And so the Sun Hunter pack was absorbed into the Iron Moon territory, its members scattered and reformed under new leadership. Those who had directly harmed Freya were exiled, but the rest were given a second chance. Some could not look at Freya without shame. Others begged her forgiveness, which she granted with grace. And still others looked at her in wonder, finally seeing what Gabriel had seen from the beginning. The seasons turned, and Freya bloomed. She discovered her gifts, the magic that Omegas possessed but rarely developed because they were never given the chance. She could heal with a touch, could soothe the most savage beast, could call the moon's power and weave it into shields and weapons. Gabriel encouraged every discovery, delighting in watching her come into her full strength. One spring evening, as they walked through the high meadow where wildflowers painted the ground in a riot of color, Freya stopped. Gabriel, beside her as always, waited patiently. She turned to face him, and he saw tears on her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. "I am with child," she said softly. "We are going to have a baby." Gabriel's knees buckled, and he sank into the flowers, pulling her down with him, his large hands spanning her still flat stomach with reverence. "A child," he whispered. "Our child. Freya, you have given me everything. A mate, a love, a future, and now this. I do not have words for what I feel." "Then show me," she said, smiling through her tears. And he did. He kissed her amid the wildflowers, as the sun set in shades of gold and crimson, as their wolves sang with joy, as the territory celebrated below, sensing the happiness of their Alpha King and Luna Queen. He kissed her stomach, whispering promises to the child growing within, promises of protection, of love, of a world where they would be cherished. He laid his head against her abdomen, listening for a heartbeat still too faint to hear, and Freya ran her fingers through his long black hair, overwhelmed by the perfection of this moment. In the months that followed, Gabriel's protectiveness reached new heights. He hired the best healers from every territory. He had the finest craftsmen create a nursery filled with hand-carved furniture and soft textiles. He read every book on pregnancy and childbirth he could find, determined to understand what Freya was going through. And every night, he would talk to their growing child, his deep voice rumbling against Freya's swollen belly, telling stories of brave wolves and starlit skies. Freya watched him with wonder. "You are going to be an amazing father," she told him one evening as they lay in bed, his hand on her stomach feeling the baby kick. Gabriel looked at her with eyes that shone with unshed tears. "I never thought I would have this," he confessed. "A family, children of my own. I resigned myself to being alone, to ruling without the comfort of a mate or the joy of offspring. And then you came into my life and changed everything. You gave me hope, Freya. You gave me a reason to be more than just a king. You made me a man, a husband, and soon a father. Every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive." Freya cupped his face, pulling him in for a kiss. "We will build a beautiful life for our child," she said. "They will grow up knowing love, knowing safety, knowing they are valued. They will have everything we did not." Gabriel nodded, his jaw tight with determination. "Our child will never know rejection," he vowed. "They will never know pain at the hands of those who should protect them. I will move heaven and earth to ensure they have a childhood filled with joy and wonder. And they will have you as a mother, which is the greatest gift any child could receive." Their daughter was born on the winter solstice, entering the world with a cry that rang through the castle like a battle call. She had Gabriel's dark hair and Freya's blue eyes, and she was perfect in every way. Gabriel held her with shaking hands, this fierce warrior who had never feared anything suddenly terrified of the tiny being in his arms. "She is so small," he murmured. "So fragile." "She is strong," Freya corrected from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "She is ours, and she will be raised knowing she is loved, knowing she is valued, knowing she can be anything she chooses to be." The labor had been difficult, lasting through the night and into the morning. Gabriel had refused to leave Freya's side, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement, wiping her brow. When the healers suggested he wait outside, he had growled at them with such ferocity that they quickly backed down. Nothing would separate him from his mate during this crucial moment. And when Luna finally arrived, when Gabriel heard that first cry, he had wept openly. Tears streamed down his face as he watched the healers clean and wrap his daughter, as they placed her in Freya's arms. The sight of his two greatest treasures, his mate and his child, was almost too much for his heart to bear. Now, as he held Luna for the first time, he felt something shift in his chest, a love so profound it eclipsed everything he had known before. He had thought nothing could surpass what he felt for Freya, but this was different. This was his child, a piece of himself, and a piece of Freya, a miracle made flesh. "Hello, little one," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I am your papa, and I promise you, with everything I am, that I will keep you safe. I will love you unconditionally. I will support every dream you have, and I will make sure you never doubt for a single moment that you are cherished beyond measure." Luna's tiny hand wrapped around Gabriel's finger, and he laughed through his tears. "She already has me wrapped around this finger," he said, looking at Freya with wonder. "I am completely lost to her." Freya smiled, reaching out to touch Gabriel's face. "Good," she said softly. "That is exactly how it should be." They named her Luna, for the moon that had watched over Freya in her darkest hours and had brought Gabriel to her side. Luna Iron Moon, daughter of the Alpha King and the Omega Queen, heir to a territory that had learned that strength came in many forms, and that love was the greatest power of all. In the weeks following Luna's birth, Gabriel proved to be a devoted father. He would pace the halls at night when Luna cried, rocking her gently, singing old wolf songs in his deep voice until she settled. He changed diapers without complaint, bathed her with careful hands, and spent hours simply watching her sleep, as if he could not quite believe she was real. Freya would often wake to find Gabriel's side of the bed empty, and she would follow the sound of his voice to the nursery. There, she would find him sitting in the rocking chair, Luna cradled against his bare chest, his hand completely covering her tiny back. He would be telling her stories, his voice soft, speaking to her as if she understood every word. "Your mama is the bravest person I have ever known," he would say. "She survived things that would have broken lesser souls. She endured pain and betrayal, and yet she did not let it make her cruel. She remained kind, remained hopeful, remained open to love even when she had every reason to close her heart. And when she chose me, when she gave me her trust, it was the greatest honor of my life. You are so lucky to have her as your mother, little Luna, as lucky as I am to have her as my mate." These moments, Freya watching from the doorway as Gabriel bonded with their daughter, filled her heart to overflowing. This was the life she had never dared to dream of. A mate who loved her completely. A child born from that love. A home where she was safe and valued and cherished. As Luna grew from infant to toddler, she became the light of both their lives. Years passed in a blur of happiness. Luna grew into a fierce, intelligent child who had her father's warrior spirit and her mother's compassionate heart. Gabriel proved to be a devoted father, spending hours playing with his daughter, teaching her to track and hunt, telling her stories of wolves and magic and bravery. But he also taught her gentleness, taught her that true strength was knowing when to fight and when to forgive. Through it all, Gabriel never neglected his relationship with Freya. If anything, watching her as a mother only deepened his love for her. He would steal moments alone with her whenever possible, pulling her into empty corridors for passionate kisses, whispering how beautiful she looked with their daughter in her arms, how proud he was of the mother she had become. They maintained their evening ritual of walking the ramparts, though now Luna often toddled between them, holding both their hands. And after they put Luna to bed, they would retreat to their chambers and reconnect, making love with the practiced intimacy of longtime mates who knew every inch of each other's bodies, every preference, every secret desire. One night, as they lay tangled together after such a session, Freya traced patterns on Gabriel's chest. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Bidding your crown for me. You could have had anyone, Gabriel. Someone with connections, with power, with a prestigious lineage. Instead, you got me, a rejected Omega with nothing to offer but herself." Gabriel caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I got everything," he corrected firmly. "I got the woman who makes me laugh, the mate who challenges me, who makes me think, who sees me as more than just a king. I got the mother of my child, the love of my life, the other half of my soul. If I had to go back and make that choice again, knowing everything I know now, I would bid even more. I would give up everything for you, Freya. The crown, the territory, my very life, because none of it means anything without you." Freya's eyes filled with tears. "I love you so much," she whispered. "More than I thought it was possible to love someone. You healed me, Gabriel. You took all my broken pieces, and you put them back together with patience and kindness and unwavering devotion. You showed me what love is supposed to be. Safe, nurturing, empowering." Gabriel pulled her closer, tucking her head under his chin. "And you showed me that I am capable of more than violence and duty," he said. "You taught me softness. You taught me that vulnerability is not weakness but strength. You taught me that the most important battles are not fought with swords, but with hearts. You made me better, Freya. You made me whole." As Luna grew older, she became a witness to her parents' love, learning by example what a healthy relationship looked like. She saw how her father always asked her mother's opinion before making important decisions. She saw how her mother stood beside her father as an equal, not behind him as a subordinate. She saw the small touches they exchanged, the looks that communicated entire conversations, the way they supported each other through challenges and celebrated each other's triumphs. On Luna's 10th birthday, as the territory celebrated with a grand feast, Gabriel pulled Freya aside to a quiet balcony. The music and laughter from the hall faded to a pleasant background noise as they stood together under the stars. 10 years, Gabriel mused, his arm around Freya's waist. 10 years since our daughter was born. 13 years since I first saw you in that courtyard, and yet it feels like both an eternity and a single moment. Time moves strangely when you are with your true mate. Freya leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. I remember thinking, that day in the courtyard, that my life was over, that I had reached my lowest point, and there was nowhere to go but further down. I could never have imagined that I was actually at the beginning of everything, that the man who would become my entire world was watching me from the shadows, preparing to change my fate. Gabriel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I remember feeling called to that auction, he said. My advisors thought I was mad. Why would the Alpha King attend a common slave sale? But something pulled me there, some instinct I could not name. And then I saw you, and I knew. My wolf knew. This was the moment everything changed. This was the person I had been waiting for all my life. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars, listening to the sounds of their daughter's birthday celebration. These moments of peace, of contentment, of simple togetherness, were the foundation of their relationship. Yes, there was passion and desire, and the intense connection of the mate bond. But there was also this, the quiet comfort of being with the person who knew you completely, and loved you anyway. Do you think we have been good parents? Freya asked suddenly. Do you think Luna will look back on her childhood and feel loved? Feel secure? Gabriel turned to face her, his hands cupping her face. Luna will look back and see two parents who adored her, he said with certainty. She will see a father who put her needs above his duties as king, who played with her in the mud and taught her to fight and told her bedtime stories every night. She will see a mother who healed her scrapes, who listened to her fears, who showed her how to be strong and compassionate in equal measure. She will see two people who loved each other deeply and who extended that love to her without reservation. Yes, Freya, we have been good parents. We have given her what neither of us had, a childhood filled with security and affection. Freya kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. Thank you, she whispered against his lips. Thank you for giving me this life. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for loving me. Thank you for our daughter. Thank you for every morning I wake up in your arms, and every night I fall asleep knowing I am safe. Thank you for everything, Gabriel. Gabriel held her close, his own voice rough with emotion. You thank me, but it is I who should be thanking you. You saved me, Freya, from a life of loneliness and coldness. You warmed my heart and filled my days with meaning. You gave me a reason to be more than just a king. You made me a man, a husband, a father. You gave me a family. Everything I am, everything I have become, is because you chose to stay, to trust, to love. So thank you, my Freya. Thank you for being my mate, my partner, my everything. Freya watched them together, her heart full to bursting. She had come so far from that girl in chains in the auction square. She had been broken and remade, rejected and reclaimed, sold and chosen. Every scar she bore was a testament to survival. Every smile a victory over despair. The years continued to pass, each one adding new depth to their relationship. They learned each other's rhythms, the unspoken language that only longtime mates could share. Freya could sense Gabriel's mood the moment he entered a room. Gabriel could read Freya's needs before she voiced them. They moved through their days like two parts of a whole, separate but connected, individual but unified. On their 20th mating anniversary, Gabriel surprised Freya by recreating their first meeting. He led her, blindfolded, to the courtyard where it had all begun, and when he removed the blindfold, Freya gasped. The space had been transformed. Thousands of candles lit the night. The platform where she had stood in chains was now covered in flowers, and in the center stood Gabriel, dressed as he had been that winter day, his eyes full of love. 20 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. I stood at the edge of this square, and I saw you. I saw a woman in chains who refused to bow. I saw strength and spirit and beauty beyond compare. I saw my future, and I made a choice that changed everything. I claimed you, Freya Sunhunter. I bid my crown for you, and it was the best decision I have ever made. He walked toward her, just as he had that day. And when he reached her, he knelt, just as he had before. But this time, there were no chains to break. This time, he held out a necklace, a stunning piece made of moonstone and silver, shaped like a wolf, howling at the moon. "You gave me your heart 20 years ago," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You trusted me with your pain, your hope, your love. You gave me Luna. You gave me a life worth living. This necklace is a symbol of my eternal devotion. As long as the moon rises, as long as wolves run in the forest, as long as stars shine in the sky, I will love you. I will cherish you. I will choose you again and again in every lifetime, in every world." Freya wept as Gabriel fastened the necklace around her throat, as he stood and pulled her into his arms. The gesture was so romantic, so thoughtful, so perfectly Gabriel. He was the fiercest warrior in all the territories, and yet he knelt for her. He commanded armies, and yet he served her. He could destroy kingdoms, and yet he used his strength to protect her. "I would choose you too," she said through her tears. "In every lifetime, in every world. You are my miracle, Gabriel. My unexpected gift. My greatest love." They danced that night in the candlelit courtyard, alone, except for the moon and stars as witnesses, and Freya thought about how far they had come. From a transaction in this very square, to a love that had stood the test of time, that had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, that had only grown deeper and richer with each passing year. As they grew older, their physical passion never waned, but it evolved. It became less frantic, more reverent. Each touch was deliberate, each kiss meaningful. They knew each other so well now that they could communicate volumes with a single glance. They could bring each other pleasure with practiced ease. And afterwards, they would lie together and talk for hours about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence and the conversation in equal measure. Gabriel developed a habit of leaving love notes for Freya. She would find them tucked into her books, folded on her pillow, slipped into her pockets. Each one contained a simple message. "I love you. You are beautiful. Thank you for being mine. Thinking of you." These small gestures, repeated over years and decades, created a tapestry of devotion that Freya treasured above any grand declaration. For her part, Freya learned all of Gabriel's favorite things and made sure they were part of his life. She knew he loved the smell of pine, so she kept fresh branches in their chambers. She knew he found peace in the high meadow, so she would suggest walks there when he was stressed. She knew he craved physical touch, so she made sure to hold his hand, touch his arm, rest her head on his shoulder throughout the day, small connections that reassured him of her presence and love. On particularly difficult days, when the weight of the crown bore down heavily on Gabriel, Freya would draw him a bath, light candles, and wash his hair while he told her about the challenges he faced. She would massage his shoulders, kiss his temples, and remind him that he did not have to carry every burden alone, that she was there, always, to share the load. And when Freya had nightmares, still occasionally haunted by memories of her past, Gabriel would wake instantly. He would gather her into his arms, press her ear to his chest so she could hear his heartbeat, and whisper reassurances. "You are safe. You are loved. You are mine. And I am yours. No one will ever hurt you again. I promise. I promise." And Freya would calm, soothed by his presence, by his voice, by the absolute certainty of his protection. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.